Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me, as always, is Mike. Mike, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. I got the stack of comics there. So
Always good to see the stack. Always good to be talking comics with you, my friend. Today, we wanted to talk about one of our all-time favorite comics. One of, I think, the greatest run of comics or collection of comics, however you've digested it in your life or read it. And that is Darwin Cook's classic, The New Frontier. So Mike, I know you got the animated one. I'll let you kind of pop that up there.
there it is. Look, it's not a yeah,
It's
it's
not a breezy, easy read that you're going to finish in 20 minutes. Now, there's some meat
and
on the
it's
bones on
so
this one.
cool. And we were just talking about team up comics, right?
Yeah, no,
So
it's New Frontier. I think for me, I'd argue it's probably one of the best DC stories ever. I really can't name a DC comic that I enjoy more than that. I think maybe the Long Halloween from Jeff Loeb, the Batman story. But in all honesty, I think it's if you want to talk about just an all-encompassing kind of DC tale, I think it's just a masterwork from the late great Darwin Cook. Mike, I know you're a little more old school fan than I am. What is it that you love about the New Frontier, or that resonated with you so much?
you know what's so cool about it, and there's been a lot said about this because it is such a modern classic. But what's really one of the things that I really started to appreciate about it more recently is and if you're not familiar with it, what it does is it takes the in between time of comic books. In other words, Darwin imagined a world where superheroes lost relevance, which they did at the end of the 40s before the Silver Age started in the mid to late 50s with the Flash in 1956 is when comic books officially marked the beginning of the Silver Age. So Darwin imagined a world. What were these heroes doing where they had lost their relevance before they were reinvented and shoved into the 1960s and burst forth back on the scene again, as far as relevance goes. This is true to the industry, how it had this big dip in interest, and they went all different areas. They went to romance, horror, crime, all this stuff, and then they came back to their roots, and they came back to superheroes in the mid and late 50s and early 60s. And so Darwin imagined this world. But what I really have started to appreciate about it recently, not just you know the genius of him looking at the timeline and understanding there was a missing link there in continuity and grabbing that storyline and running with it and filling it in. That was masterful and genius all on its own. But the other cool thing about it was the way he crafted his characters, and he wrote and drew the whole thing. It
Yeah,
was all his. So I mean, that's masterful all on its own, right? And the way he crafted his characters, he took these old characters from the 50s, from the 40s, and reinvented them in the 50s. But he created a storyline that was, modern. In other words, yeah, it's back in time. It takes place back in the late 50s, early 60s. But he crafted stories that could hold up to today's storytelling standards.
yeah.
I thought that was a real genius approach for him. Like, the whole first part of the book is, they're on Devil Island, there's dinosaurs and,
Yeah, you got kind of the losers in there and all that.
yeah,
Yeah,
you got the losers in there. And if you're
Sergeant Rock, right? Yeah.
Sergeant Rock and, it's really cool. Um, and, he just went for it. And it's such good artwork. I mean, you could
Yeah.
tell like, he loved these characters. He knew the history, understood it. I mean, look at that.
No, I think what Darwin Cook does such a good job of in the entirety of, I think it was 6 issues that it ran for, and then when they collect it, it's a huge kind of collection. But what I think he did such a good job on, I love the art style in it, and that it captures kind of that classic art style of the 40s and the 50s.
And
I
does
think
that
that
not
Darwin did
remind
so
you
good.
like if Kirby drew Superman?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's really great that it gives the book a distinct feel, and you kind of the entire time that you're reading it, you're like you kind of feel like you're seeing a throwback. I think the other great thing that he does, I think he ties some real world elements into it. With the heroes kind of being a little bit persecuted and stuff like that. You get some hints of like McCarthyism and some real things that were going on, in the
Political.
period that this
Yeah.
covers. Um, I also think he just highlights all the characters so well. I love the Batman scene where he kind of saves the boy getting killed, almost being killed by the cultists. And then you kind of Batman does this heroic thing and it kind of turns around and the kid's terrified of Batman.
It's so
And
scary. Yeah.
it kind of shows that gap of Batman being the kind of Bill Finger, Bob Kane creation of the very dark, vengeful character to his more lighthearted 60s, Batman adventures that he had and 50s adventures that he had. He just did such a good job of threading the needle of touching on real world issues that existed at the time, issues in the comic book industry, but then also putting things together with it. Now you kind of show there, Mike, some great, Green Lantern art. I just
He
think
wrote,
it's
he
a great
loved
highlight
Green
for
Lantern.
everybody.
Oh man, it's just so cool. I mean, I love his style, you know. I mean, I'm someone who really, it's a little cartoony for my liking, but I fell in love with it all the same, you know? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm somebody who tends to like, more um, more realistic uh draftsmanship,
yeah,
but he captured the style so well, and he just brought it. And I fell in love with his art style
yeah,
uh, at the same time as I fell in love with his storytelling.
yeah,
And it's rare that you come across like a modern master. There's a who does it all. Like he wrote Andrew.
yeah. No, I think that's one of the most impressive things about it. I mean, is that it's all him, and I think it really shows when you give a master craftsman of this comic trade when you give them full reign to do their story. And I think he's so what I loved about this is, well, I think you can absolutely tell there's a lot of Darwin Cook wanting to write what he wanted to write. He's also true to the characters. He didn't change it to where you're getting Darwin Cook's version of Batman or Darwin Cook's Superman, Darwin Cook's Wonder Woman. You're getting those characters from his perspective, his angle, but he doesn't manipulate them and change them to fit the story as he needs. He kind of naturally puts the puzzle pieces together. I think there's some great stuff in there about, the way that Green Lantern shows up. I love the Green Lantern piece of the story that's in there. Flash gets a really cool story. I believe he goes to Vegas at one point and kind of stops some of the rogues, and he just highlights them all well. I think this is one of the best uses of Martian Manhunter as well. There's a great segment, with Martian
So
Manhunter
good,
watching
right?
TV and transforming himself.
So
Um,
good.
it's a really, it just is something that if you haven't read it or you've let it kind of just be known by reputation, I think it's something that if you do sit down with it, to me, it's one of, I would say in my lifetime, it's one of the 5 best runs of comics I've ever read. Maybe not to the level of like a Watchmen or something like that, but I think it's in the neighborhood. I think it knocks on the door. I think it's just a masterwork, and it's something where when you get a true artist who knows this craft of comics well, it shows what they can do. And I think also Mex is someone who clearly loved DC and the history of DC and embraced kind of, okay, how do I fit this missing gap of time between the golden age and the silver age? And
I mean, and how is it
great.
that nobody ever exploited that gap before? It
Yeah.
was just waiting for, someone like Darwin to pick it up and run with it, because there it was. I mean, all this time, 50, 60 years, it was waiting there for some writer to kind of like go, what happened to Superman? But, what happened to, Hal Jordan, or, what was happening before he found the ring, in the modern era,
Hmm.
it was just so well crafted. I
That
love
really
it.
is.
I
I think
love
another thing about this work that me and you like, I think probably one of DC's best animated films. While DC
oh,
live action has had some rough spots, the new Frontier Justice League film is one of the better adaptations I've ever seen of a classic story.
I
Um,
know.
it,
I
it
know.
really holds up well. It's one of those things where I think the movie has a little bit of a difference, but not much.
They
And I
say
love the
it's
art style in the film in that it captured what the artist did. I absolutely hate when they make an animated film and they pick an art style that's completely different from the actual original
makes it so rough.
artist.
Where these are pretty much, they go glove in hand, right?
Hmm.
And that's a testament to uh, the producers letting Darwin have hands on or oversee some of it. Of course, Darwin was a DC animator for the original Batman animated series. And so he knew how animation went, and he knew, he had some trepidations about the process of taking a tome like this and reducing it to a 90-minute animated film. But, he was pleased with the outcome, and they let him come in and kind of, walk his baby, so to speak, through the production process. And he was impressed at how well they stayed on model. Like, he drew all the models for the animators to go from when they were animating the different characters. And there were so many classic scenes in the animated show where that the key for it was right off the comic book page.
Yeah.
I mean, so many times. I mean, and so when you were watching the animated show, you go, I remember that panel from the comics. And that was
Yeah.
just, they really
No,
stayed to
I
it.
think that's the cool thing about that movie is I think, me and you talk about this a lot. We're comic book movie fans and comic book fans, but the books always come first. And I think what's really been lost in a lot lately is using the comic books kind of like as inspiration instead of actually using it to guide the movies forward. And I think as we've seen the MCU drift further and further from the comics, we've seen the movies drift further and further from being relevant and popular. I mean, and not to say that the original MCU didn't pull things, but at least there they were using elements of it. They're kind of making up entire things now. That's not working real well. And
Yeah,
I love in this Darwin Cook one that they let him have that creative input.
yeah.
That kind of, hey man, if you're going to take my work, I really wish this would be something they do more often because I feel like if you took some of these great stories that we do use for the movies and you let the person who write that, be involved to sit there and kind of go, hey man, now that doesn't look right or that doesn't look good or we should have it look more like this. I think you'd avoid some of these awful tropes and things that we have that have popped up in movies and some of these storylines that you kind of look and go like, how did you get that? And so
Where did that come from?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's great that it was done. I think that's the coolest thing about the movie is, as someone who's a huge fan of that comic, to watch the movie so cool because like no, this is just it's almost the same thing. I just get to see it brought to life. I get
I
to see
know
it animated a little bit more,
that was really
which
special for
that's
me
fun.
too.
But let us know what you guys think. Have you checked out the new Frontier? Obviously, we're not breaking any ground saying this is great, but sometimes it doesn't get quite the credit that I think me and Mike believe it deserves. So if you've read it, let us know your thoughts on it. Darwin Cook, absolutely, I think a legend in the comic book industry. He never seems to get his name out there as much as I always felt like it should be. He's got not only New Frontier, but Batman Ego is one of the great Batman stories. The late great Darwin Cook, just so awesome and a guy who just truly loved comics and was a master of the medium. And so, let us know what your favorite parts of the New Frontier are, or if you've read this or if you've seen it, what your thoughts are. We always like hearing from you guys, but hopefully we brought a spotlight to this. If you haven't read it, if you've kind of just let the internet tell you what this is, it's absolutely, even if you know what happens in it, worth checking out. It is one of the best comics you'll ever read. But
Absolutely.
as always, thank you for joining us. We always enjoy you guys watching and seeing your comments below. So let us know what you think. Thank you for your time. We hope you have a happy holidays.